Hey there everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today where we are going to do some canning. This is going to be probably the very last canning day of 2024 and boy am I ready for it. We have canned a lot this year. Dan just finished organizing the pantry, getting ready for our pantry tour, and we definitely outdid ourselves as far as the amount of jars we put up in the pantry this year compared to years past. So I can't wait to show that to you. One of the things that I like to do before canning season is officially over and I clean up my canners and I put them away, is go through my freezer and my pantry and see if there's anything in there that needs to be dealt with. And I definitely found a few things this morning and last night when I was going through both. One of them are these very sad looking pears. So we went away back, I don't know when this was, 6 weeks ago or something like that, and Dan had purchased a couple of bags of pears for me. We brought one bag with us, but on the way out the door, I just grabbed the other bag because they were going to be bad by the time we got back and just threw those right in the freezer. So I have whole frozen pears here that I need to do something with. And one of the other things that I found was some turkey bones that I had thrown in the freezer after having turkey dinner a couple of weeks ago. And those needed to be dealt with as well just because they were taking up space in the freezer. So I put those in the roaster oven overnight, covered them with water and have been letting them cook on low. So I have two different things that I'm going to make with that broth. I also found just a little bit in the bottom of a bag of navy beans. So I decided to turn those navy beans into a pork and bean style, like a Boston bean kind of style pork and bean recipe that we're going to put into jars. I also found a ham that was sitting at the bottom of my freezer that needed to be dealt with as well. So I'm going to use some of that ham to add to our pork and beans and maybe make a ham soup or something like that. By the end of today, all of this food that might look a little sad or might have otherwise gone to waste will be turned into food in jars for my pantry, and I'm really looking forward to this. So the first thing we're going to do is take these rather sad looking pears with their stems and everything, and we're going to put them into a pot with a little bit of water on the stove and let them just soften up and cook down a little bit. And then I'm going to run these through a food mill, and that way I can remove the stems, the seeds, the skins, all that kind of stuff. And I'm probably going to make a pear sauce out of these. I think maybe a vanilla pear sauce or something. But we'll get these cooking down first and then decide what to do with them after. Okay, so let's just dump these in here. These should soften down and cook really quickly. So I'll keep a close eye on them so we don't end up burning them. Just a little bit of water in there. These were super ripe, so I'm probably not going to need to add any sugar or any sweetener to them because they're probably going to be sweet enough on their own for whatever I decide to turn them into. Put a lid on to keep the heat in. Before we go any further, I want to share some really exciting news with you. I think it was a couple of days ago that I let you know that my cookbook was just about ready for pre-sales, and I'm excited to let you know that we are officially set up for pre-sales. So this is the Little Mountain Ranch Family Cookbook, and it is 147 pages with over 60 recipes in it. If you did purchase my first cookbook and you would like to have the additional 21 recipes, we did create a digital version of this cookbook as well. So that might be an option if you want those additional recipes, but you don't want to buy the entire cookbook. Again, I totally understand that. The digital version is available with a clickable index, so it's really easy to navigate around if that is more your speed than a actual physical copy. This is a pre-sale, so we're going to be shipping out all of these by the end of November, so you should be receiving them well before Christmas time. Pre-orders are going to be available until the 5th of November, so make sure that you place your order before that date for shipping out at the end of November. And I just wanted to send out a huge thank you to all of you who have already ordered the cookbook. We did send an email out to our email list, and I was just absolutely blown away with your support. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so now let's get into putting together some recipes here. I have pre-cooked my navy beans over here. So this was the amount of navy beans that I had left to deal with. Does anyone know why they're called navy beans? I'm assuming it has something to do with like military navy, not the color of them, of course, because they are light colored. I'm just going to give these beans a rinse. We're going to need some brown sugar, some molasses, We're going to use some of the smoked paprika that we made together the other day, a little bit of chili powder, and a little bit of onion powder. We have around 12 cups of navy beans here, so I'm just going to read you out the recipe that I am using as kind of my base. I'm going to be flavoring these to the way that we like them to taste. For the base recipe, you need 4 cups of navy beans, 8 ounces of salt pork. I'm going to be using ham instead, 3 large onions, lightly packed brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt and dry mustard, and 2/3 a cup of molasses. So I don't feel like chopping onions today. So rather than adding onions, we're going to be adding onion powder. We're going to add 2 cups of brown sugar here and around 1.5 cups or so of molasses. Probably 3 tablespoons of onion powder. And I'm going to also add some smoked paprika for a little bit of a smoky flavor. Oh, it smells so good. A little tiny bit of chili powder, maybe a teaspoon. I'm just going to add this whole container because I don't have a ton in there, but that was probably 1.5 tablespoons or so of ground mustard. So one of the things about home canning baked beans is you want it to be more of a soupy texture, not super thick, because if it's too thick, then the heat can't penetrate even in the pressure canner into the center of that. So this will look a little bit soupier when it goes into the jar than it would normally, like when you buy it at a store in a can. So one of the things that you can do for baked beans like this is you can just soak your beans overnight and then make your baked beans and bake it in the oven for around 3.5 hours or so before you can it. But I used my Instant Pot and pressure cooked these beans, so they are already well cooked, and then I'm going to be pressure canning them. So all those flavors that I just put in here will meld and give it that kind of traditional Boston baked bean flavor. One of the secret ingredients to baked beans that Dan has always added to his baked beans is a little bit of applesauce or apple juice. So I'm gonna add a little bit of apple juice to this to make this runnier. So this is more the consistency of sort of a store-bought baked bean, but I need it to be a little bit runnier than this for canning. Let's try the flavor of it first and just make sure all our seasonings are good. Definitely more onion powder for sure. Like a lot more onion powder. Was not nearly oniony enough. Okay, now I'm going to chop up our ham and add some ham chunks to this as well. I am going to run you through all the steps for using the electric pressure canner because I had a couple of people ask me that in my last video if I could show that, so I will show that today. This ham is still a little bit frozen, which is actually okay because I don't want to use all of it for this recipe, although I do want to put a fair bit in there. I'm also going to add a little bit of salt and pepper to that as well. I want to add some of the fat to this, but cut off kind of most of it. So I'm going to add chunks of it because we like to have chunks of ham in our baked beans. Do you know, I was thinking today that I don't think I've ever actually had traditional salt pork before. How many of you have had salt pork? And if you have had it, what are your thoughts? I know that was the way that it used to be preserved before refrigeration. It was a very standard way to preserve pork, was with lots of salts. They would basically just take the pork, cut it up and into strips or into cubes, and then put it in large crocks and layer it with a lot of salt. So that would be salt meat, all the way up. And then that would keep it preserved. So, but I've never had it before, and I've always been kind of curious about the flavor. Okay, let's mix that in and see where we're at for ratios of beans to ham. Have any of you ever had hot dogs in your beans? It's something Dan grew up having, and he occasionally will make that for our kids, which they love. Okay, so I think that's probably gonna be good for, for flavor and texture. So I'm going to add a little bit of vinegar to this because I feel like it needs a bit of vinegar. I'm going to go grab some apple juice and add some apple juice. And I'm going to add enough apple juice to make this a little bit more runny. And then we're going to get it jarred up and popped into our pressure canner. Okay, so we have some of our home canned apple juice here, so I'm just gonna add a bunch of that till my beans get soupy enough. So I hope you can see kind of the texture of that. So it's just a soupy bean. And this is gonna thicken up a little bit in the canner as well. Okay, that's better. I needed a bit more of that vinegary flavor. So I'm gonna add a little bit of salt, like a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons or so to that. Some pepper. So just around a teaspoon or so of pepper. Stir that in, and then I think that's perfect. I could eat a bowl of this just like this. Tastes really, really good. So just make sure we're well mixed. Get our jars and pop these into the canner. So I'm just gonna be running through my electric pressure canner today because I don't want to pull out my other canners. I have to say, the more that I use the electric pressure canner, I'm kind of becoming a convert. I almost feel disloyal to the way that I have been pressure canning for years and years and years, but it is just so convenient to use this machine. But my very favorite thing about it is the fact that it really does not have a lot of noise outside of the first, I don't know, 30 minutes or so while it's all heating up and steaming off and all of that. But it's a nice quiet machine, which I love. So we're gonna jar up our beans. I'll leave a good inch of headspace for these. Whenever I'm kind of gauging headspace, what I usually do is go up to where your jar kind of curves a little bit, right about here, just below the top line that you would put your ring on. That way you don't have to get crazy about measuring or anything like that. I'm gonna have another probably jar or 2 of these, which is fine because I'm going to do something with the turkey broth that I have back there. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a soup or if I'm just going to can the broth straight up, but I can put that in, or put these 2 jars in with that batch. When it comes time, we are going to wash off our rims because we made a big old mess, and get these put into the canner. And I believe we have to do these for 90 minutes because they're beans, but just double check. Oh my gosh, I made a real mess on this one. Okay, so this is the insert for the electric pressure canner, and we're going to add 3 inches of water into the bottom of this canner. And because I am adding a warm product, these aren't hot, but they're still warm from the beans, I'm going to be adding warm water into my canner. We're gonna put our insert into our canner. This canner does have the option of pre-warming your jars for you. Let me show you. So this is the Presto, just to clarify, and this is pressure can. So we want to press yes for pressure can. Now we're going to set the amount of time. We're going to go for 95 minutes. Press this button again. So it says insert jars, which we've done. Then it's going to say warm. And since my jars have already warmed up, I'm going to hold this for 3 seconds. And then it turns to heat. So it'll skip that pre-warming setting and then go straight to heat. So now it's going to start heating these up. Put the rest of our jars in. And we are going to make sure that we remove the regulator. That's this. And we're going to put our lid on. One thing I will mention is this is the seal in here, and sometimes the seal can pull off. So just make sure that you double check that your seal's on the right way all the way around. I'm going to put it on. And then it has to install. It has a little install. It says install right there. And then you just twist it until it says lock. You're going to take this, put this down, and then lock it on. Now we're just going to leave it. It will tell us what to do next, and I'll show you that in just a few minutes. You can see how it's saying vent right here. So that is the venting that's happening out of this hole right here. Don't put your hand over that because it's hot. Now it's going to count down to 0 from 10 is where it started, and that's when it is going to seal and start pressure canning. Okay, so you can see here how it says can and put regulator on. So this is the regulator. This is where we're going to put it, and we want to put it so that it's pointing towards where it says can. Just like that. Make sure you push down on it a little bit. And then we're going to press the button again, and it's going to start canning. You'll still see some steam coming up out of here, but as soon as the pressure canner actually pressurizes, this will pop up and it'll be completely quiet. Our canner is now starting to run through, counting down its time. It's nice and quiet, which is, like I said, my favorite thing about this canner. I've done a bunch of chopping here for the turkey soup. I've decided to make a turkey soup, if I didn't mention that before, with the turkey broth that I have been cooking in the roaster oven all night. I still need to finish chopping up my onions, so I'm gonna chop up my onions and just add those right to my jars. So what I'm doing right now is making up my own recipe for soup, which with pressure canning is completely fine to do. I'm gonna share with you some of the important things to keep in mind while we're doing this. But what we're basically going to do is fill our jar up with around halfway, sometimes a little bit more than halfway, with our solid ingredients, and then we're going to top the rest off with our broth, and that will create a delicious soup. We are going to can our soup because it's going to have meat in it for, I think it's 75 minutes, but I'll have to double check the time for that. And I'm just going to be roughly chopping my veggies for this, and I'm keeping this a pretty simple turkey soup. I am doing enough jars for a single batch of the turkey soup, so that's the 5 quarts that fit into the Presto pressure canner. And then I am going to do, I have the 2 jars of beans that I have left over here that I do want to pressure can as well. So I'm going to do 3 more jars of either straight up turkey broth or turkey soup if I have enough of my ingredients here to do that with. So that's going to give me 3 more batches of canning for the pantry, another 15 quarts by the end of today, which is just absolutely fantastic. Does anyone have any guesses to the number of jars that I ended up canning this year? I'll give you a hint. It was more than last year. So I am really excited about it. I feel like I'm actually a little bit ahead in my canning. So ideally, I would love to have 2 years supply of most of my canned products in my pantry. And the reason for that is that you can never predict what's going to happen in the future. Maybe I won't be well enough next year to do canning the way that I'm able to do this year. Maybe we will want to go away on a holiday during a certain time when a certain vegetable or fruit. Oh, I forgot my glasses again. Oh my gosh. I wear goggles when I chop onions. Anyway, or maybe we'll have a complete flop with our garden because the weather isn't conducive to growing certain things. So for that reason, I would love to have enough to be able to have that little bit of flexibility for the following year. I've never been able to do that, but I do think that I potentially did that with my tomato products this year. And I did have a few jars held over from last year of salsa. I didn't have to can salsa this year, which was awesome. But I'm hoping that I have even more than that for next year's pantry. So anyway, so if you do have a guess, I would love to hear what your guess is. Oh my gosh, burning eyes, burning eyes. So we got a bit of onion in there. We're gonna add some dried sage, around probably a little less than a teaspoon or so of dried sage to each jar, and a teaspoon of salt. We're adding pickling salt to this, so we know it doesn't have any additives in it, which is what you want for canning. Gonna add our turkey. I'm gonna put a handful of turkey in each one, and then go back and add some more if I have enough. So this is just some turkey that I had left over in the freezer. So one thing I really like to use soup like this for is when we're not feeling well, because it's just easy on the tummy to eat like a turkey or a chicken soup. And if I wanted to add some noodles to it or something like that, I could. But even just like this, it's just kind of nice to be able to open up a jar and have some soup. So I think that's probably good for carrots. And then we'll top it off with a few potatoes. And then we are going to top this off with our broth. And since my broth isn't strained, I'm going to use a strainer in my funnel here. And then I'm just gonna scoop the broth right in. This is gonna be so good. Right into our jar. And we're going for an inch of headspace on here as well. I might end up with a canner full of just straight up turkey broth, which is great. I do have quite a lot of turkey broth in the pantry right now because when we process our own turkeys, I have a massive stock pot that I put out on a propane burner outside. And then I put all the backs and the necks off the turkeys. And this year we had, I think we did 6 turkeys. And then I just cook all those down with a whole bunch of veggies and onions and garlic for usually at least 12 hours, 24 I prefer for all that good flavor. And then I can that up. So I usually can a lot. This broth is super flavorful and aromatic. It had, I stuffed these turkeys that I cooked with apples and garlic and onions and then slathered it in butter and sage. So it's really, and salt and pepper, of course. So it's really rich broth. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be able to can a batch of straight up broth, which is great because that'll bring us to 20 quarts by the end of today. And if I wanted this to go faster, I could pull out my other canners and just can all these up at once. But I can just take it slow and easy with just using the electric pressure canner and not have to listen to the hissing in the background of my big canners. Okay, I might even have enough little bits of turkey in there to make a couple more quarts of turkey soup because I do have a few more potatoes and carrots here too. So might end up doing that. So definitely washing the rims on these ones because there's fat in that broth and that will definitely affect our seal. So we'll give these a good wash. So if you've missed this in my last few videos, I tend to do this where I get all my stuff jarred up and then I run it through the canner as the canner becomes available. And the way I get away with that, because of course these are going to cool down quite a bit before they go in the canner, is I empty my canner out. So I actually dump the water out and then fill it up with whatever temperature of water my jars are and then start the process again. So it does take a little longer that way, but it means that I can get all my stuff jarred up into my jars and then get my kitchen cleaned up and be finished. And I like that. I like not to have the mess just kind of continue on throughout the day. I could have added a little bit of parsley into these too, I guess. So that's what it looks like before it goes into the canner. So we'll set these jars back. And if you're gonna be taking too long, like say I have some of these jars that aren't gonna end up going into the canner until say this evening, then I would let them come down to room temperature on the counter and then pop them in the fridge until I was ready to can them up. So since I have all of this mess here, I'm just gonna throw all of the rest of the veggies and the onions and the broth and the turkey bits that I have into jars so that I can get this mess cleaned up because this is a lot of oily, greasy mess. I hope watching me can like this causes you to feel a sense of confidence about your own ability to do it because it's really not as scary and difficult as it might seem like it is. It really, really isn't. I mean, the first couple of times it is a little bit intimidating and you might feel a bit flustered, but I think that's pretty normal for any new thing that you might try to take on. But once you kind of get the swing of it, it really is not that difficult at all. And it is such a fun thing to be able to have your pantry full of food that you made yourself. So this is going to be more broth and veggie than it's going to be turkey, but that's all right. It'll still taste good and still be nice when not feeling well. In fact, it might even be better without all the big chunks of meat. Woohoo, that is hot. All right, 4 more quarts. Okay, I'm going to wipe up this mess and then we'll move on to our pears. So this is a food mill and I'm missing the handle on it as you can see. And all it does is separate out the skins and the seeds and the stems from whatever fruit. And the fruit has to be fairly soft in order to be mixed through this. I'm also missing one side of this. This thing is very old. I have an electric one now for large batches, but I keep this old ratty one around for small batches like this. So all we're gonna do is scoop our pears right into here and then spin it around. And then in order to clean it out, I just go backwards and then I can just scoop out the skins and everything. I'm gonna let this go a little bit more, make sure we get, whoops, all that good stuff. And that will just go to the chickens. Still pretty warm. So I'm actually gonna run this through on the finer screen because there's still some bigger chunks in here that I don't want in here. So this is the bigger one. So I'm just gonna put the finer one in there. Okay, so we're gonna run this through again through here, and this should be really fast because it's so smooth already. Ah, that's better. That's nice and smooth now. So I have this thought, and I don't know if I'm going to follow through with it or not, but one of my good friends, Corinne, hi Corinne, sent me over some apple jelly that she had made, and it's a spicy apple jelly, and it was one of the best spicy jellies I've ever had. It was so good. So I asked her for the recipe, which she said she'll share with me. But she told me that what she does is she takes when she's making applesauce and there's extra liquid so that she has a nice thick applesauce, she takes that liquid and she turns that liquid into her jelly. So it has a really strong flavor. It's not just like juicing the apples and making the jelly, but actually like that nice syrupy liquid that comes off of when you're making applesauce. And I'm thinking I could do the same thing with this and make a spicy pear jelly. I feel like that would be really, really good, but I don't know if I want to take the time to actually strain off a little bit of this juice. I think what I would have to do in this case is use some cheesecloth and strain out some of the juice. I don't know. Let me think on that. I'll just finish getting the rest of this run through the mill and decide after. Would be good though, wouldn't it? Okay, done that sticky job. So let's give this a little taste. You know, that actually could use just a little bit of sweetening. I think honey and a little bit of vanilla, and it would make a really nice sauce. But I feel like I want to make jam. So I think I'm just looking through some recipes to see if anything strikes my fancy. And I found this jam, pear jam recipe that looks really good. It's from All Recipes, and it has like warming spices in it, like cinnamon, cloves, allspice, nutmeg, lemon juice, of course, and then just pectin. And I think I might want to make that. It's for 4.5 cups of mashed ripe pears, and I'm thinking I have around 8 cups in this bowl. So we're gonna grab a pot, and I guess we can just rinse out this pot and reuse this one. Normally I won't double a recipe that I have never made before, but I'm going to in this case just because I know I've had lots of different types of pear jams before, and I know that these flavors are gonna go really well together. We're gonna call that 8 cups. So we need 1/2 cup of lemon juice, cinnamon and cloves, allspice, and nutmeg. Let's change this just a smidge. I have a whole bunch of this apple pie spice that I made the other day, which is basically all of those seasonings, the nutmeg, the allspice, the cinnamon, and the cloves already in here. So we're gonna do 4 good teaspoons of this in here, because I think that's probably gonna be the perfect seasoning for it. So what I'm gonna do with this is, this recipe calls for sugar and a lot of it. I'm gonna be using a Pomona's pectin, not a Pomona's pectin, Pomona's pectin for making this. And Pomona's pectin, you can cut down the amount of sugar that you use in it by quite a lot, or you can use honey. So I'm gonna use some of my homegrown honey here and add a bunch of it. And then I'll just keep checking until I get it to the sweetness that I want. It's 7 cups of sugar for the base recipe for this. It's a lot of sugar. So we're gonna pop this over on the stove, and we're gonna have to mix a little bit of our Pomona's pectin into some honey. If you've never worked with Pomona's before, it is a different kind of pectin, but it is one that you can use less sugar in, which is really nice. So we're gonna do at least 4 teaspoons. Actually, you know, for the ease of mixing, I think I will add just this into the sugar. And then if you don't mix your pectin in with whatever sweetener you're using, it will go clumpy when you add it into your boiling stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna add a couple teaspoons of my calcium water to this. So when you're using a little bit extra, when you're using Pomona's pectin, you can adjust the amount of pectin depending on how thick. Oh, one sec. My fridge has a handy alarm on it, which is actually very good. Before we got this fridge, I can't imagine how many times it was just left open, because the alarm goes off on that fridge at least twice a day. But anyway, so no matter the size of batch, you're always going to use around 2 teaspoons of the calcium water, but you can adjust the amount of pectin that you add to it depending on how thick you want it. So I'm adding 4 good sized teaspoons to this. And I like to use a whisk when I'm adding the pectin. And then remember, like I said, always mix the pectin in with a bit of your sugar or your honey or whatever sweetener it is that you're using. So we are going to let this come back up to a boil and then boil vigorously for 1 minute. Turn my heat up. It's already thickening, which is great. So I'm going to use pint jars, I think, for this jam, since that's what I have waiting on the counter over there. And then I'm going to can this in my steam canner right here for 10 minutes. Okay, 1 minute. So now we're going to jar up our jam, and we're going to leave around 1/4 inch of headspace. So I'm going to wash the rims of my jars, jar them up, steam can them for 10 minutes in the steam canner, and I'll be back with you when all this canning is out of the canners and show you what we ended up with. All right, friends, we ended up with 28 jars, which I'm really happy with. And I did end up pulling out one of my other canners, because the one thing about this canner that's not the best, the electric Presto, is that it takes a really, really long time to both heat up and cool down. So I did pull out my other canner just to get the rest of this stuff done. But I'm happy with that. And I'm also happy to say that I am officially done canning for 2024. Although when I shared that over on Instagram yesterday, I had so many people write me and laugh and say, sure you are, or there's no way you're done, because I love canning so much. But I am definitely ready for a break. I may experiment with some other recipes over the winter, especially meals in jars, but I don't anticipate doing any more bulk canning for a little bit. I hope that you enjoyed spending this time with me, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.